Hey, hello, I'm Kråkan, also known as Kråkan, and welcome to Classy Movie Rambles, where I talk about old movies that I found in my closet while cleaning. This week's movie is Modern Times. It's a black and white romantic comedy from 1936, and it's about 1 hour and 23 minutes long, starring Charlie Chaplin, Paulette Goodward, and Tiny Stafford. And the movie starts with the opening credits and one of those workers' punch watches. And then cutting to a monologue basically explaining it's an industrial times and people are working. And then cutting to a director of a factory. He's lying a puzzle and reading a newspaper, and a secretary walks in and he gives him some water and he takes his pills. And then he checks the feeds, checks the camera, and he gives the foreman orders of what to do. And then cutting to Charlie Chaplin station, the station C, and he's basically screwing on bolts on this conveyor belt, kind of like a motion kind of thing. And there's two people behind him trying to punch in these bolts that he's screwing in, and there's like this gag with there's a fly irritating him, and he kind of gets behind and he have to like catches up. So this movie is a silent movie from the beginning with no sound. So music and dialogue and everything was added afterwards. So it's kind of like it's a physical comedy in every kind of sense. So kind of the language of the movie is emotions and over exaggerated and lots of acrobatics and stuff. But anyway, and then Charlie gets a break and he goes to the bathroom to smoke some cigarettes, and then his break is over and he goes back to the conveyor belt again. And then cutting back to the director's office, where some other company is kind of, they want to make the factory more efficient, so they have this machine that force feeds the employees, but the director is kind of like, I know we have to test it. So then cutting to lunch break, and of course Charlie gets selected for this force feeding machine, and and of course it goes haywire, and the machine starts smacking him around, and they try to fix the machine, and they put some bolts on his tray and they start the machine, and the bolts kind of pushes the bolts into his mouth, and everything is kind of a crazy scene. And then work continues, and Station C gets, from the foreman, gets a lot more work to do. It basically speeds up everything. And then Charlie goes into the machine because he has to tighten the bolts. And he kind of goes into the machine and they have to reverse it. But by then it's already too late. He's kind of hit his head or something, and he's doing all these kind of crazy, he kind of dances like a ballet, what do you call a ballerina, and he kind of messes around with the factory. He kind of switch on and off switches, and he messes with all the guys, and then he goes outside and he chases this secretary out, and he kind of follows this old lady. And then of course there is some police trying to catch him because he's acting like a crazy, and he goes for a fire hydrant. He runs back into the factory and messes with the switches again, and then eventually it ends with him spraying his boss with an oil can, one of those canisters which you grease up the machinery with, and he gets fired and he gets put into jail basically, and he loses his job through this process. And eventually he gets out from Yale like 10 days later, and he just goes outside to look for work basically. And then there's like this truck with some wooden planks, and they're driving off, and they have this like flag at the end of it to mark like it's some wood, so be careful not to run into it. And then the flag kind of falls off the pickup truck from the truck, and he picks it up and he starts to wave it around like, hey, you drop your flag, and he goes after the car like waving. And then there is like a demonstration behind him coming from around the corner, and they think he's like the Communist Party leader or something, so they actually bag him again, and then they put him into jail. And then cutting to a poor girl in the streets, or rather in the docks. She's stealing some bananas, and she gives them to a bunch of kids, and she runs, and she eventually winds up at home with her father. He is an unemployed man, and he's basically overworked, and she gives him some bananas and everything is fine. He gets a little happier, I guess. And then cutting to Charlie in prison, and he shares a bunk with this bad kind of guy, and there's this bunk bed joke where he slams the bunk in the head of the other guy, which is kind of funny. And then they go for lunch and they kind of sit down, and there's like this running joke with Charlie stealing the bread from the bad guy from his nose basically every time, returning it and whatnot. And then there is a drug bust, a drug raid. So the guy sitting next to Charlie is a drug dealer. So he hides these like nose powder in the salt shaker, and he gets taken away. And of course Charlie uses the salt shaker, and he puts it on his food and he kind of eats it. And every time he takes a bite of the food, he goes like one of those weird kind of reactions. It's kind of funny. And then the lunch break is over and they're supposed to be taken back to their cells, but Charlie is tripping, so he just walks around and he kind of loses contact with the group and he kind of gets away, and he winds up in the courtyard. And then the bad guy is trying to save this drug kind of person, this drug dealer. So they basically, some guys comes in to save him basically, and they put the police in one of the cells, and Charlie gets in and he kind of helps the police, and that resulted in him releasing the cops and basically getting a better treatment because of a good thing he did. And then cutting to the poor girl again, collecting some firewood, and then her father gets shot in this kind of protest riot. So what happens, this is kind of a sad scene. It's like this girl has two younger sisters. They get taken in by the law. There's nothing she can do about it, and then she runs off in the commotion with basically no place to go. And then cutting to Charlie again, and now he's in a much more comfortable cell, and he is about to get this good news. So he gets taken to the ward, I guess, and on the same day the mayor and his wife is visiting the prison. So there's this kind of funny scene. There's like he sits down with the mayor's wife, and there's like a gas joke because of the tea, I guess, they were drinking, and she puts on like she takes like a pill or something to get relief of the gases, I guess. And Charlie kind of sits there with a newspaper, and then what happens is that Charlie gets released. And he gets like a work permit with the warden's kind of signature, and he kind of uses this throughout the movie to get job at other places basically. So he goes down to the docks and he gets to work in the shipyard to build boats. So the first assignment that he gets is get a wedge, like a wooden wedge, so we can stabilize the boats when they build them. And he goes to find like a wooden wedge, but he takes it from an already existing kind of framework, and he kind of punches it loose. And then you see in the background, like this one of these early kind of effects, and the ship kind of goes down into the water, and it's not done, it's not really built, so it kind of sinks. And the foreman kind of looks at him, and he just takes up his jacket and he just leaves. And then cutting to the poor girl in the street stealing some bread, and the police kind of catches her. But Charlie is also there because he's looking for a job basically, and he wants more or less to go back to jail, I guess, because it was a much comfortable place. And he takes the blame for the bread stealing, but of course it wasn't him, and the police kind of finds out that it's the girl, and so she runs. And then Charlie goes down into a diner, and there's also one of these funny scenes. He tries to get caught just going back to jail again, because he can't really live a normal life at this point. So he goes into this diner, and he puts up like a full tray and puts all this stuff on it, and it's like this mountain of food and coffee and sweets and whatnot. And then at the end of the thing, when he's supposed to pay for it all, he kind of just calls in a police officer through the window, and he kind of gets in, and he's like, and it's kind of funny because it's this silent language. There's no dialogue or anything. There's a little bit of music, and he kind of looks at the cashier, and the cashier lady kind of says like, you understand what they're saying, just like this amount of money. And he looks at the police officer and like, pay her. And they kind of realize, okay, you don't have any money, you're going to jail. And they kind of pick him up, and while they're outside waiting for the car to pick him up, basically what happens is that he goes to this. There's this cigarette stand next to the diner, and he kind of takes up these cigarettes and he kind of gives some to the kids and besides him. He kind of picks up and kind of smokes one, and the police realize what he's doing, and he kind of takes away his cigar. It's kind of a funny scene, and then he gets put into the police car, basically. This kind of pickup, more like a van, older type of van, I guess. And he just stands there, and then all of a sudden this poor girl gets picked up and put in there, and he's kind of a gentleman, so he offers the seat to her to sit down, and she's kind of in this desperate situation, and she cries, and she kind of comes to her senses, and they kind of how do you say it, like brutally force the policeman guarding the entrance, the back of the truck, out of it, so they kind of fall out and they land in the streets. And when they come to, they kind of run away because they just want to get away, and they manage to escape. So now he's with this girl, and they found like a nice, well, it's not a nice house, it's more of a like a shed, and it's basically falling apart, but they have this like fantasy that they want to live somewhere, they just want to be left alone, so they have this kind of place. And what happens is that Charlie gets a job as a security guard at this mall, and he kind of gets it because he has this work permit still, and it's still valid, I guess, and he gets the job there. So what happens is that when it's time for his night shift, he lets the girl in, and they go through different apartments like the toy store, and he puts on these like rollerblades, or they're not inlines but rollerblades. They have like 2 pairs of wheels. Yeah, you probably know what I mean. But anyway, he does some skating on these, and this is a good scene or a very interesting scene, because I don't know if it was filmed like for real or if it was a special effect. But anyway, there's like this edge, and he kind of skates on these rollerblades very close to the edge, and he puts on a blindfold, and he does this like very, very kind of, he's very good at skating, by the way, and he kind of goes very close to the edge and almost falling off, and then his girl kind of says like, hey, what are you doing? And he realizes that he's about to fall, and he's about to fall, and then they save each other. And anyway, and then they go to this like to the bed area, the bed apartment, and he kind of puts her down there and puts on a blanket, and he said, I'll wake you up when my shift is done, basically. And he goes down and he turns off all the lights, but of course what happens, there's like this rubber, how do you say, like a burglar is a better word, and they kind of shoot at him, and because he's on these rollerblades, they kind of miss him, and he goes up the escalator, and he says like, come down. They point a gun at him, and he kind of like, he runs with the rollerblades on. When the escalator is going up, he's going down on it. It's kind of a funny scene. And then they go to this like, and there's like a bar, and they have like these kind of oak barrels, and the bad guys shoot at him, and they hit the barrels, and then they force him to just stay there, and they put a gun on him, and there's like a hole in the barrels, and he kind of, and the rum or the whiskey or whatever, the spirit, he's just standing there, and he kind of gets it all in his mouth, and it's like he gets drunker and drunker, and then one of the guys realized that he was one of the guys that actually works on the mill or something, and they kind of bond together and they drink. And the next scene is him waking up in the closet store, or like the fabrics store, fabrics apartment, and there is this old ladies basically looking for some nice garms, I guess, and they kind of pull at his underwear, and it kind of pulls him up. And of course he gets fired and he gets taken to jail. And by this point, his, I guess you can call her a girlfriend now, I guess, has run away because of the overall commotion. Because she realized that she wasn't, getting waked up. So she kind of ran. And then after 10 days in jail, the girl kind of goes after Charlie, and they meet up. And they go to sit in this suburban kind of area with nice surroundings, good neighborhoods. And there's this ideal family, a husband and a wife, and they kind of kiss each other and they go part way, and the wife kind of giggles and goes in, and Charlie kind of says like, wouldn't you imagine a life like this, and would you do anything for it? And they kind of imagine what it would be like to live in this kind of mansion, kind of nice house, and have all these kind of things and good food and everything, and they kind of go for it. So he gets a job. Well, before he gets a job, he actually there's the police officer behind him, kind of chasing them off the grass. So there was one thing I got wrong actually. After this last jail visit, he gets that's when they acquired the shed, and there's like this dream kind of come through. So they live there, and he goes for a swim, and he hurts his head by jumping into the water in the early morning before breakfast. And then they go for breakfast, and there's like this simple breakfast, and he gets the newspaper, and he sees that the old factory that he was working for at the beginning of the movie is actually hiring people again. So he goes there, and he barely managed to get in, and he gets a job as a repair guy, and he has this supervisor with him. So they try to fix this machine, and this is like this physical comedy where he really doesn't know what he's doing, but he's just making things really bad. And of course his supervisor gets stuck in a machine, and his head's kind of sticking out of one of the holes of the gears or whatever. And then he cut for break because it's lunch, and Charlie's like, okay, what am I gonna do? And he tries to get him out, but he can't. So he has to feed his boss, like his supervisor, feed him some food. And eventually he reverses the machine and gets him out. And then there is a riot again because of there's some union rules, I think, and there's a riot and they stop working again. And then cutting to the girl, she's outside of the diner from earlier, and she's dancing. This like more fancier diner, like well, I guess you have a restaurant area, I guess. And the supervisor of that place sees her, and he sees like, okay, she can really dance. And then cutting to her actually dancing at the place and getting famous, and she does this act, and she has nice clothes and everything. And then she talks to Charlie later, like, I can get you a job at this place, which he does. He becomes like this waiter, and of course it's physical comedy yet again. He works as a busboy, so they get these orders, and he goes into the kitchen, and he's supposed to deliver them, and there's some slapstick about the doors and people getting hit in the face and whatnot. And then he's supposed to deliver this kind of meal to this high up hotshot kind of guy, and he tries to cross the dance floor, but there's people, and the dance just starts when he enters the dance floor, and he kind of has to balance the tray on one hand, and there's like all these things on it, and he has to balance it, and it's like a funny scene where but of course everything goes south. And then there is like the final scene where all the dancers or the waiters and busboys, they have like this show note where they're supposed to like sing and dance. So he goes into the other room, and of course he doesn't know the words because he hasn't worked there in a long time. So his girl is there, and she says like, you have this like cufflinks, and he writes down the words that he's supposed to sing, and of course he remembers the words, he remembers the dance and everything, and he goes out. But the first thing that happened when he goes out, he does this kind of scene, and he kind of flips his arm out in a dramatic gesture, and the cufflinks fall off, and then he's left like, okay, what am I gonna do now? And she says like, improvise. And there's this funny scene when he sings mock-up French, and the audience love it, and they laugh, and it's really physical dancing and all these kind of things, very very showman-like, very good number actually. And meanwhile, when this is going on, the authorities from earlier have put up a wanted poster for the girl, and so her face is everywhere basically. And they go into this, and once this number is over, they kind of move in on her and try to capture her basically. And in the commotion, Charlie tries to help her. They throw a bunch of chairs, and they kind of run away, and they try to like escape this mess. And And then the next morning, basically, they're out on the countryside, and they don't really know where to go. And Charlie kind of tells the girl, like, everything will be okay. Don't worry about it. They got nicer clothes now. They got some money, and they're basically out for a new start. So they walk up out in the sunset, or in the morning sun, I guess, to a better, happier life. And that was that movie. So what do I think of Modern Times? It's one of those movies that you can't really recommend because there's a very distinct taste. I'm a person that likes like physical comedy, and it's like one of those samurai movies like Akira Kurosawa, also a black and white movie. They don't really need to have dialogue or anything because the way that the picture language kind of speaks, if that makes sense. You see the emotions of the characters, you see kind of clear what's going on, what's going to happen, and you kind of understand it without the audio cues and music cues. And then, I mean, it's a short movie and it's entertaining. There is some, as Charlie has said in the past, there is some laughter and there is some sorrow, but in the end, it's a good movie. So thanks for watching, and take care.